Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Ha, ha, ha. We are the Cinema Addicts. Ha, ha.
Okay, this month is the month of October, which means we are going to be bringing to you a whole bunch of horror related showdowns. And again, we are the Cinema Addicts. This is the Cinema Showdown, so I wonder what showdown we're doing this week. You're going to have to listen in to find out. So here we go.
I will feast on your soul.
All right, it is Cinema Showdown. This week we have two horror films of recent years. Both films take place in a cabin in the woods. And we have the Evil Dead remake 2013 versus The Cabin in the Woods 2012. Okay, so we have two horror films. Both runtime is pretty similar. Both are right around an hour and a half. The Cabin in the Woods is an hour and 35. Evil Dead, hour and 31. So both right there, typically how long horror films are, 90 minutes. So we'll start out with The Cabin in the Woods. It stars Kristen Connolly, Chris Hemsworth, a.k.a. Thor. Always got to throw that out there. And I'd like to point out, this was actually made pre-Thor. It actually came out, it actually was made in 2009. And Thor was made, I think, about a year later, and then Thor came out in 2011. But The Cabin in the Woods didn't come out to 2012. So when that film came out, everybody kind of already had a good idea of who Chris Hemsworth was, just because how big Thor previously was. But Cabin in the Woods was actually filmed in 2009 and didn't end up finally hitting the theaters until 2012 due to MGM's went bankrupt. It put several of their projects on the shelf. Red Dawn remake was also on the shelf, which also had Chris Hemsworth in it. So kind of thought that was interesting to point out. The film also has Anna Hutchinson in it, Richard Jenkins, who I like a lot in a lot of films. I thought it was also interesting to point out that the film is written by Joss Whedon, who went on to direct the Avengers Part 1 and 2. So he's really familiar with Chris Hemsworth. They've actually worked together quite a few times now. The Evil Dead remake stars Jane Levi, Shiloh Fernandez, Lou Taylor Pucci, however you pronounce his last name, Jessica Lucas, and Elizabeth Blackmore. Mostly pretty unknown cast there in the Evil Dead remake, but they do a pretty good job. Alright, so we'll move on to some Rotten Tomatoes ratings and Internet Movie Database ratings. For The Cabin in the Woods, it gets a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 7.0 on Internet Movie Database. The Evil Dead remake gets a 62% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 6.5 on the Internet Movie Database. So by those ratings there, they have Cabin in the Woods rated better than the Evil Dead remake. Although I like to point out the 92% that Rotten Tomatoes gives it is outrageously way too high. I don't understand how it has that high of a rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but that happens sometimes. If you follow ratings on there, you'll notice some movies are way too high or way too low. But then again, it just comes down to opinions. So, as far as the box office goes, because I am box office Robbie, so I got to point out the box office. The Cabin in the Woods made $42 million domestically in the U.S., and the Evil Dead remake made $54 million a year later, domestically in the U.S. So as far as box office goes, The Evil Dead wins that one.
All right, so starting us off first, we're going to talk about story. That's what we usually do. Both are very different stories, but both occur in the cabin in the woods. That's funny, because one of these movies is actually called Cabin in the Woods. Craziness. But first off, we'll talk about The Evil Dead, or I'll talk about The Evil Dead, because it's my turn. So, The Evil Dead is a remake for the most part. It's kind of hard to classify this movie, because is it a remake or is it a sequel? It's actually both in my eyes, because sort of the exact same things happen in this new movie, but they're different characters. And also you get a little teaser at the end of Ash, a.k.a. Bruce Campbell, a.k.a. Ash, because he's now one and the same person. So I was saying that I feel, since this is sort of a remake with a little tweaking, it's not going to get like the full points. It's going to get 0.5 off, because of the fact that it is a remake reimagining of something that's already been out. So you can't really give it too much props, because, all right, so you went off this movie and we made a little bit better or a little bit worse, depending on if you will enjoy the original Evil Dead or not, which I will not divulge if I like that movie or not, because I don't want to get yelled at. But some of the things in the story I really liked. The whole purpose of coming to the woods in the cabin was because one of the main actors, David, his sister is addicted to drugs. So him and his friends decide to bring her to this cabin so she can detox. That way they can get her help. One of their friends is a nurse, and so on and so forth. I think that was a really good plot device to use for this movie, because when she starts turning into the abomination, they think it is a reaction to her going through detox. They think she's going through withdrawal, which I think is a very smart way to get around this. So they're not like, we're going to spend the weekend in the cabin during the summer, and we're going to do the this and the peanut butter and the jelly. Sorry, I don't know why I went to Bill Cosby there, but Bud and Pops. Yeah. What I did not like about the story for this movie, I thought it was really dumb at the end, where Dave was like, oh, I'm just going to bury her and kill her and then bring her back to life. Dude, you should have done this in the first place. All your friends would still be alive. Sorry. I don't know. I just did not care for that ending part. I did think it was really cool when Mia was going up against the Abomination, because now the Abomination is a separate entity, which makes no sense at all. It should have been rather put back into the mystic spirit world, or it should have consumed her. Because the way the Abomination comes about is they possess a body. But since the Abomination is not in this body anymore, how the hell is it walking around? Everyone else is dead. I don't get that. I thought that kind of brought down the ending a little bit for me. If they didn't do that, if they would have just killed her, or if she would have died and then got brought back to life, the Abomination's gone. They solved the problem. I feel like that would have been the better way to go. Like I said, I just did not care for that ending part. But hey, that's just my opinion. I know Brian and Robbie both really like this movie. I also really like this movie, but not because of the story. I like it because of the blood. The blood of the innocent. All right, so moving on to Cabin in the Woods. This movie right here has got to be one of the most original films in the horror genre, for me at least. I know there's tons out there. I know, like, for some examples of some really good original horror movies would be stuff like Nightmare on Elm Street, where people are dying in their sleep. I think that is a really cool idea. I wish that could be one of the showdowns that we get to do, because I really like that film. What's more terrifying than going to sleep and not being able to do anything? You have to sleep at some point. There's no way getting around it. I know they kind of went with that with the new movie, but I'm not going to get into that because we're not talking about that movie. But anyway, this is a very, very original movie. The whole concept of this movie is that there are factory workers that are controlling this plot of land that they attract teenagers or some sort of youth to go to. That way they can get them murdered. That way they can please the gods. I know some people don't really like that aspect of it, but I think it's really cool seeing the office workers and stuff controlling what's happening. I think that is a really cool idea. Let's see here. I thought it was really funny. The writers of this movie, Joss Whedon, not Josh Whedon. I can't talk either. What's wrong with me? And Drew Gabbard, who also just wrote The Martian, by the way. But they wrote the script in 3 days. One worked on the upstairs, one worked on the downstairs part. Downstairs being like the horror-related area, and the upstairs being like the people controlling everything. They wanted to fool the audience when you first went and saw this movie. They have the actors Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford just driving around in these little cars talking about, their work and stuff. They did this right here to fool everyone to thinking they went and saw the wrong movie. I remember when I went and saw this movie, I was like, did we go in the right theater? Which, it was very effective, because I had no clue until like the big cabin in the woods lettering came up on the screen. Thought it was really cool. Also, another real cool thing with this movie is that the victims pretty much choose how they are going to die. They get brought to this cabin or led to this cabin with some unseen way or whatever. There's always, I guess, every time they bring someone to these cabins, there's like a different reason, and they get choices along the way. You can turn back. There's this like really creepy like gas station worker called Mordecai, and basically was talking crazy out of his head, and it's kind of warning them, don't go there, but they had their choice to move on. But anyway, when they're in the cabin, they go downstairs, and there's like a junk file room. It looks like a hoarder used to live here, and each little object is tied to some sort of monster, some sort of killer, some sort of being of some sorts. Now, when they pick up a totem, they officially choose how they're going to die. And in this case, in the movie, they pick up this book, and it is related to the zombie redneck torture family, which are called the Buckners. So I thought that was really cool. Another thing I thought was kind of funny, because this movie kind of pokes fun at horror movies. It's not labeled as a comedy at all. It's labeled as horror and mystery, which I think it's pretty funny that for me, it's mostly comedic. I don't know. I go into horror movies just laughing. I'm not like, oh my god, they're gonna kill you. I'm like, you better run, bitch. Sorry for cussing, but that's who we are now. We're going to cuss. We're just not going to say the F word. I could have been talking about a female dog. But anyway, as they're going down to the basement, the cellar, at the control center, they have this big whiteboard of different monsters, and they're all betting on who is going to win. Who are they going to pick? So I have the list of monsters here for you. It's quite a long list, but there's some funny things on here. Okay, let me cough real quick. Here we go. Here is the list of whiteboard murderers. So first up, we have a werewolf. That's normal. We have an alien beast, mutants, zombies, some classics. Reptilius. I don't know what Reptilius is, but I'm sure it's a big lizard monster. Clowns. What's more creepier than clowns? Witches. We also have sexy witches. I mean, come on, guys. Who wants to be killed by sexy witches? My question is, do these sexy witches still have the big, rotten, nasty witch's nose? Or is it like, Emma Watson witch type, Because, I'm sure Robbie's like, sign me up. I know Brian's going to be like, sign me up. I want to die by sexy witch Emma Watson. I know that for sure. I bet you. $10. Bet you. They're not sitting here listening to this and be like, yeah. That's how I want to die. Moving on. We also have demons, Hell Lord, angry molesting tree. A little nod to Evil Dead because there's an angry molesting tree in that movie. A giant snake, Deadites, which is also a nod to the Evil Dead series because the Deadites are the people that possess the bodies. We also have a mummy, the bride. I'm curious what the bride is. I'm wondering if this is like the Kill Bill bride because she can kill a guy. The scarecrow folk, a snowman, dragon bats, vampires, another original one, or classic, I should say. Dismemberment goblins. Now, do these goblins dismember people, or are they like pieces of goblins that come and kill you? You also have the sugar plum fairy. Now, there are some ridiculous ones on here. I'd like to see what the sugar plum fairy looks like. You have a merman, which is the character Hadley's favorite monster that never gets picked. It's very sad. You do get to see the merman in the end, and he looks pretty gross. You have the reanimated. You have a unicorn, which you get to see at the end. A Huron, Sasquatch, Wendigo, a Yeti, dolls, zombie redneck torture family, which is the Buckners, the Doctors. I wonder if like Dr. Oz is included in this. A jack-o'-lantern, giants, twins. I don't know what twins would be. And last but not least, you have on the board Kevin. Now I was looking up some stuff to see what Kevin is. If they were to add him into the movie, he was supposed to be a sweet-looking guy who looks like he could work at Best Buy. See, this board right here is one reason why I love this movie, because of the fact that they have like some random stuff in here. They also have a flying purple people eater that you see later on in the movie. Also, later on in the movie, you also get to see what kind of creature the guy from Hellraiser is. He has a little puzzle box, and he just stares at you. And he's like one of the first monsters you get to see later on. But one last thing I thought was really cool of the story was the purge at the end. The two characters remain. They somehow get down out of the whole torture cabin area, down into where the offices are, down where all the monsters are kept. They hit a button, they purge everything. So it is just a huge bloodbath at the end. You get to see all the monsters killing everyone. You get to see a unicorn impaling a guy in the chest. I know Brian doesn't like that part very much. I know he thinks that's silly, but it is funny. I think it's funny. I personally think it's funny. Also, real quick, I know I'm talking forever about the story, but I also really, really like the whole aspect where they're killing people based on their stereotype. Like, you got the jock, you got the whore, you got the fool, you got the virgin, and so on and so forth, which plays tribute to all of the other horror movies because they usually die in a certain order. And it's always the virgin or the girl that lives at the end. That's usually how it goes. Most movies I've seen, the girl lives at the end. But, I don't know. So, what do you think about this movie, Robbie?
I will say for the Evil Dead remake, I had to take off .50 just because it is a remake. It is a copy of the original 1981 film that starred Bruce Campbell. So I feel like since it's not really original story, even though it's still a pretty good horror story, I had to take off .50. Now for the Cabin in the Woods, it's more of an original ideal, kind of, but at the same time, it's still ripping off a little bit of the Evil Dead story and other classic horror films, but just kind of adding extra twist to it. With the Cabin in the Woods, it's kind of a horror comedy in a way, but it's not so much that it's really a comedy. It's just that it likes to poke fun at typical horror cliches that you see in horror film after horror film throughout the years. So you could probably only take .25 off for story for Cabin in the Woods, but I still went with .50, and the reason why is, even though it is more of original story a little bit, I just wasn't crazy about it. I didn't really care for the twist after twist after twist, especially setting up the final moments of the film. So I still had to take off .50 for story.
So, I just watched The Cabin in the Woods, the whole entire movie, just last week. Because Zach's watched it. Zach likes the movie a lot. My brother Robbie on here, he watched the movie back when it came out. He told me he never cared for it, he hated it, and he told me a lot about the film, and so did Zach. So, in what I heard of it, I really didn't like the movie at all when Robbie was telling me about the movie. So, when we did a showdown, I'm like, I'm going to have to watch this movie. I'm going to definitely have to watch it now. So, I watched Cabin in the Woods. It's a really good, decent film. I think I might like it a little bit more than Robbie, but not as much as Zach. I'm probably right in the middle there. It's a good movie. It's just the movie lost me at the end with the whole we have to sacrifice somebody. 4 or 5, the fifth person being a virgin is just by faith and all that. To sacrifice to the Greek gods. I guess the Kraken is down underneath. We don't want him to resurrect out of the ground and kill the whole world type of thing. I thought they went a little too extreme. I don't get me wrong, I love the whole comedy with horror thing, with not taking it too serious and making fun of other movies and such that they did in the movie. I like that all a lot. I just wish they left that ending part out. If they would have kept it of a storyline of we're a bunch of rich people betting against each other which of these teenagers, the jock or the virgin or whoever, would survive the night. And, let them pick which monster it's going to come after and kill them all. I think if they would have left it simple as that, with the whole comedy and humor to it, I would have liked Cabin in the Woods a lot more than what I did. But since they did that whole crap with this whole sacrificing things, and then at the end, the Greek gods or whatever down and underneath busts the hand up out of the ground type of thing, it just lost me kind of right there. The whole ending really just bummed me out and hurt the movie a little bit for me. But overall, I liked the movie quite a bit. I thought it was a decent movie, especially for this day and time with horror movies. You really can't be that picky anymore, so it was a decent one. But now with the Evil Dead, this remake is really, really awesome. With all the remakes they're doing right now, Evil Dead is one of them that deserves the respect and definitely did a great job with remaking of the original. Because the original with Bruce Campbell, that movie, you gotta have some balls, you gotta have some guts to remake one of these movies like Evil Dead. It's a cult classic. Don't want to mess this movie up, and they didn't, so my hat's off to them. They changed a few things in the remake compared to the original, which is fine by me. Doing something a little different is always fine. As long as it's nothing major that would hurt the film, it's fine by me. So I liked Evil Dead. I like the remake a lot. So
Okay, you guys got some good points. So let's move on to the main acting.
For the main acting, with The Evil Dead, the main star was Jane Levi, and I thought she did a pretty good job for a horror film. I still feel like overall, though, on judging on an acting scale, it was still closer to average. So I took off I'm sorry. Actually, for the main acting for Evil Dead, I took off 0.25. I was actually I was actually looking at my score I gave the Cabin in the Woods on the main acting there. So for the main acting of Evil Dead, I took off 0.25. I thought she did a pretty good job for a horror film, and I thought it was a little bit better than average. So I took off 0.25 for that film, and for the Cabin in the Woods main acting, which I guess you would say is Kristen Connolly, I thought she did a decent job. I thought it was average for a horror film, so I took off 0.50 for her.
I actually think for the main acting, I think they're about similar. The difference with Cabin in the Woods is you got pretty much two different settings here. The two guys running the control booths, the ones that are orchestrating everything, I feel like they're the main acting for their setting, and then the girl that plays Dana is the main actress for the cabin setting. Now, I think that Dana, she did, like Robbie said, I think she did okay. But I feel like the people that really stole the show was the characters Sitterson and Hadley. I think that those two together are the people that kind of drive this a little bit forward with their, back and forth. I thought they had a real good chemistry together. With the Evil Dead, I think that the main actors, because I think there's two main actors with this. I think it's the characters David and Mia. Mia, great. She was creepy as hell. She did a great job with being the Abomination. She did a great job when she was her junky self. Now, David, I thought he was bland. I didn't really care about him very much. But, I don't know. So, Brian, what do you think about the acting?
acting wise, I thought acting was good. Acting's good in both movies, really. Even Cabin in the Woods, the acting in it, I like. Chris Hemsworth, I thought the way he died in it was really funny. How he was on the dirt bike and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna jump across this with my dirt bike, and I'm gonna come back with fire trucks and cops and choppers, and we're gonna make those bastards pay." So I thought it was funny how you knew it was coming because you knew that they had it all scanned off and everything. They had it blocked there, so you knew ahead of time before he was going to start gunning it to jump that big old cliff gap that he was going to get killed right there. So there's scenes like that I thought was really good and funny in Cabin in the Woods. But
For the supporting acting, we have for the Evil Dead remake, it would pretty much be the other three members that was with Jane Levi in the cabin, which is Shiloh Fernandez, and the Lou Taylor, Poochie actor, Jessica Lewis, and Elizabeth Blackmore. That's who I have as the supporting cast members. So for those actors there, I thought they did an average job for a horror film. It was nothing spectacular. So I took off 0.50. For the Cabin in the Woods, I pretty much felt the same way about its supporting actors. which mainly was Chris Hemsworth, Anna Hutchison, Richard Jenkins. There's a couple other stars, but that would be supporting cast members. I also took off .50 for that.
For the most part, I'd have to agree with you, Robbie, on the supporting acting for both these movies. I also took .5 off for both of them. I thought they were all around just average. Nothing really stands up to the other people. Now, with Cabin in the Woods, I do have to say, if this comes down to a tie for me all around, I would have to give a little bit more credit to Cabin in the Woods because of the fact they are supposed to be playing the stereotype characters like the jock and so on and so forth, like I said previously. I feel like everyone played those parts perfectly. But if you're not really paying attention to that, it kind of seems like, okay, they're having bland acting. It's typical generic horror film acting, but that's what they were going for. But first viewing of this back then, I'm sitting there thinking, well, this is not very good acting. But when you think about it, it is a little bit better. So I am still giving it a .5 off, but that point ... it's a little bit better than Cabin in the Woods. Like, I don't know, the only good thing those actors were good at were dying. That's all I gotta say about that, so, yeah.
Now to special effects. I thought the special effects in the Evil Dead remake was amazing. The movie is really bloody, really gory. You got the actors when they turn to the Deadites. I believe that's what they call them. When they turn into that, they're kind of spooky looking. A lot of makeup goes into their faces and the contact lenses and everything. I thought the special effects in this film was really good, and the gore and blood. And it seems like as this movie goes on, it gets bloodier and bloodier and bloodier. And when you don't think it could get any bloodier, it starts raining blood. So I thought the blood and gore and special effects in this movie was really good, so I couldn't take off anything. Now, for the Cabin in the Woods, I actually had to take off quite a bit. I don't know about how my co-host here at BZR feels, but when I watched the Cabin in the Woods, I thought I saw a lot of cheap special effects, cheap CGI, especially when it shows like when the movie starts to progress, like maybe 3/4, getting closer to the end, and it finally shows you how they got all these like different monsters and killers and snakes and everything locked up in these rooms that they can choose to release on the people that's up in the cabin above ground, because they're kind of betting on these monsters and how quickly they can kill the people up there. So when they finally show these monsters and they eventually get released down below in these underground holding cells, I guess you want to call, and the people that works down there, they eventually all get released and they attack all the people that works down there. It's this part of the movie here where it shows a lot of the monsters killing people that works down there, and a lot of blood and gore. But the special effects of the monsters and the blood and gore all looked cheap, cheesy, CGI to me. Nothing looked practical at all. So for the special effects on Cabin in the Woods, I had to deduct .75.
A lot of creepy scenes. The whole girl down in the cellar coming up, and they chained to the doorway right there, and she's peeking out, looking at that girl, and she cuts her part of her arm off. I thought they did a great job of terrifying you, and the gore in Evil Dead was really awesome. So the more bloody, the more gory it is in these movies here, the better. So in Cabin in the Woods, there's some CGI in it that looked really bad and crappy. I mean, I know that they have to use some CGI on some certain things, but if you're going to do CGI in movies, you gotta put some money into it, make it look good. I know this is just a crappy old little horror movie that you don't want to put a whole lot of money into CGI on it, but still at the same time, it no matter what, it hurts the score for me. If you got bad CGI, I'm gonna notice it. I don't care if it's just a little bit or a lot. I'm gonna notice it, and it's gonna bother me a little bit, and if I'm gonna sit here and give you a score on all categories and stuff with special effects and stuff, it's gonna take a little hit. So, and there wasn't, compared to Evil Dead with blood and all that. Evil Dead's got it by far. There's so much more blood and gore, making you kind of squinch when you're watching it. Gruesome scenes. So
Alright, so sounds like you guys don't care for the special effects in Cabin in the Woods. I actually only took 0.25 off. They did use a lot of practical effects. I thought that the Buckners, I thought they looked pretty gruesome. The guy with the the saw blades in his face, I thought that looked very well done. Now, yeah, I agree there were a lot of really bad CGI, but hey, it's a horror movie. There's not a lot of horror movies out there that have good CGI. I mean, this ain't, no Star Wars or, any like big budget sci-fi film. Usually when you have a horror movie, usually they're more of a lower budget, which, this was probably one of them. So, yeah, they had a lot of things that they couldn't use practical effects with, like a dragon bat. You can't, put a costume on a dog and make that a practical effect. You can't do that kind of things. Now, like I said, because there was, some bad CGI, I did take off, but for the practical effects that they did use, I thought were done really well. I thought like the whole set designs were really well done. I felt like the whole cubes, everything I thought was pretty good. I don't think the CGI is bad enough to knock this down to 0.75 off, because I think that's a little excessive. But what can I say? I thought the purge at the end, I thought that was really well done. Yeah, there were, like I said, bad CGI. And again, you can only do so much with a horror movie. This ain't no Oscar film. And basing that's where I'm getting my score at for this. Just for the fact that I'm basing this off of other horror movies. I felt like this is about the same, if not a little bit better than a lot of horror movies. But, yeah. Special effects with Evil Dead, yeah, they are totally better because, yeah, they did use nothing but practical effects. They did use some CGI to remove wires and stuff, but what thing doesn't do that? I didn't take any points off for this because when I want to go see a gory movie, Cabin in the Woods, not Cabin in the Woods, but Evil Dead. Evil Dead is the movie to watch. This is I'm pretty sure this is about the most goriest movie I have seen, the most messed up movie I have seen. You got a tree raping a girl in this. The girl that gets turned into the abomination from the Deadites, she looks creepy as hell. Like I have to give it to them, for that. The whole scene where she's down in the cellar and the one girl goes down there to check on her. She kind of pulls out a knife, and then Mia, aka the Abomination, takes the knife and just licks it with her tongue, splitting her tongue in two. I mean, that is just nasty. And I also saw that there was like 50,000 gallons of fake blood used for this film, and most of it was used for like the end scene alone. But at the end of the day, just because this has good special effects and good gore does not make this a better film, does not make this a great film. Yeah, I want to go see. I liked watching this movie. I enjoy it completely. But there's so many other things about this movie that are bad. I mean, take Saw for example. The sequels. Those movies are gory as hell, but are they good movies? No, they are not good movies. I think Evil Dead is a good movie, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say this now. I think Cabin in the Woods is a lot better. Because after you watch this movie a couple times, those gore effects, they're just not going to hit you as good as they did the first time you watched it. I feel like that kind of makes things a little worse for this. So I don't know. Now I want to go ahead and talk about score. The score for these movies, I thought, were a little bit better. I rated them about the same. One big thing about when you watch a horror movie is the soundtrack, the score to it. The scores are always a lot better because they help drive the intensity of the scenes that are going on, so you're going to remember a little bit better. I know I personally cannot remember too much from the scores and stuff, but from what I do remember, I do know that they are better than average. They're not the best. They're not no John Williams soundtrack, but they are a lot better than average, which I'm pretty sure that's going to go across the board with any horror movie that you watch. So, Robbie, what do you think of the score?
To be honest with you, I had to kind of like look up what their scores was for the Evil Dead remake in the Cabin in the Woods. It was really nothing that stood out memorable to me that I can even think of. So I kind of had to look those up and listen to them. And to me, both scores is just kind of average horror film scores, nothing memorable. So I had to dock .50 from both films. For the entertainment value, I thought the Evil Dead remake was very entertaining. It isn't, one of the most entertaining films I, have ever seen as far as the horror genre. But it was pretty good and I was well entertained. So for entertainment value, I docked .25. For The Cabin in the Woods, I thought the movie, entertainment-wise, was very average. So I deducted .50 for The Cabin in the Woods.
I do agree with you that the entertainment for Cabin in the Woods is, .25 off. I thought the movie was very gory, very fun. The first time you watch it and everything. Kind of gross. But it did have some slow parts at the beginning. I understand that they have to have like the whole like, well, you gotta get you clean, Mia. We just gotta get you clean, Mama. I understand all that. It kind of builds a story, makes you care about the characters. But entertainment-wise, it's not like in your face like the rest of the movie. Now with Cabin in the Woods, I also took .25 off. I was really entertained. Just, to see how the upstairs people are going to be, affecting the people downstairs and vice versa. The last half of the movie was really fun, fast-paced. It was real fun for me, I thought. There were some slow parts in there, like the whole, why is this girl licking the tongue of a dead wolf, story doesn't really need that, but I guess it kind of showcases that this girl is the horror of this horror movie. But with rewatchability, I took Evil Dead off .5 just for the fact that I've seen this movie about 3 times. The first time I watched it, I was like, oh my god, this movie's so good. But the second time, it doesn't hold up for me as much because, yeah, it's gory as hell, but I don't get the same impact the second, third time I watched it. Like, the whole thing where she's licking the blade with her tongue and it's splitting it, I'm like, That's on IMDb right now, yeah. But with Cabin Woods, I took .25 off. I feel that just because they have the 2 different settings and stuff, I feel like this movie's going to hold up longer than The Evil Dead. And also, I want to say real quick, speaking of the whole special effects thing, if you don't want to see some cheesy special effects, watch the original Evil Dead. That thing is bad. I know I'm going to get a lot of heat from this, especially from probably Robbie and Brian. I know I've talked to Brian about this a lot at work and stuff. I understand that this was a low budget movie made in the 80s, but still. I also watched some clips from Army of Darkness, and there's this one scene where he gets his face stretched. They had more money for that, and that is bad. bad CGI. So if you guys want to see some bad CGI, that is bad CGI. I feel like the Cabin in the Woods had a little bit better than that. Even though I know this is, the 2010s right now, but still. That's why I'm kind of comparing horror movies with. I forgot to say that earlier. Sorry. And I know you guys probably hate me now. But, Robbie, what do you think about the rewatchability?
For the Evil Dead remake, I think the film is very rewatchable. I probably wouldn't rewatch it like every time I catch it on TV whenever it's on, but I would say maybe once, twice a year, especially around Halloween time. If it's on TV or I put the old Blu-ray in, I could watch the Evil Dead remake at least once a year. So I took away 0.25 for the Evil Dead remake. For the Cabin in the Woods, I know there is a pretty big little fan base for this film that really liked it. I feel like with the Cabin in the Woods, you either got what it was trying to do and really loved it, or you just thought it was kind of lame and pointless and didn't get it. That's kind of how I feel with it.
I guess I'm one of the few that get the movie or like it.
So for the rewatchability for me, I had to take away 0.75. It's just not a film that I would be really that much interested in seeing quite a bit. Maybe a few years from now, I might rewatch it again, see if I feel a little different about it. So overall for these two films, pretty much with The Cabin in the Woods, I feel like the film tries to poke fun at horror cliches, but it just goes too far. The movie adds twist after twist, tries to make the plot more outrageous than thought possible. And by the final scene of the film before the credits roll, you'll be thinking, are we watching a spoof movie? Is this Scary Movie Part 6? I don't know. It's just, at the end, you get Sigourney Weaver surprisingly pops up in a role that is important to the big plot twist at the end. And then the scene where the big godlike hand comes up through the ground. It just, by that point of the film, it just gets so slapstick stupid that I just did not get the film. I get what it was trying to do. There's been other horror films in the past that has been kind of considered horror comedies, and even the original Evil Dead's trilogy was a horror comedy that poked fun at horror films, but at the same time was a horror film in itself that lived up to being a good horror film. Besides, like a zombie film that pops in my mind right now is The Return of the Living Dead. Not sure if Zach's ever seen that horror film.
I have not.
But it's considered like a horror comedy zombie film. Not as much as Shaun of the Dead or Zombieland, but it's considered to be kind of horror comedy, but at the same time, it's at its core, it's still a horror film, and still a good horror film. And that's where I feel like The Cabin in the Woods loses it for me, is that at its core, yes, it's still a horror film, but it's not a good horror film. It just focuses too much on trying to be original and different and make fun of horror cliches, but in the end it just kind of becomes a horror cliche and a silly one at that. So I overall did not get The Cabin in the Woods. Now for the Evil Dead remake, this is the 1981 Evil Dead remake of that starred Bruce Campbell and directed by Sam Raimi. This remake doesn't try to be witty and funny and clever, like, and some people even say charming. Bruce Campbell being charming in the original Evil Dead trilogies, but this film here doesn't try to go in that direction with being kind of funny and witty and clever. This here just goes straight for the horror, straight for the terror. There's nothing funny about it at all. It's just a straight up gore fest. So it doesn't come close to the witty goofiness that Bruce Campbell brought as Ash in the original, but I feel like it does do the original justice as far as being a pretty good, solid horror film. And it is better than a lot of horror remakes and a lot of horror films that you see these days. This is definitely one of the better horror movies of this century. So, in closing, when you tally up all the points docked for both films, I gave The Cabin in the Woods a 6.0 out of 10 stars. For the Evil Dead remake, I gave a 7.75. So for the winner for me, by a long shot, it's not even close in my book, is the Evil Dead remake.
If I have to put a score on Evil Dead remake, I have to give Evil Dead at an 8. And then with Cabin in the Woods, I gave it around a 6.5. So to me, 6.5 ain't too bad. It's better than a lot of movies I can give scores to, especially with horror movies. So nowadays, so I got Evil Dead better than Cabin in the Woods. But to me, this was like an easy, hands down winner here. This remake of Evil Dead is just awesome. You want to watch a good, gory, scary movie for this day and time, definitely watch Evil Dead. Evil Dead, hands down. Cabin in the Woods, like I said, Cabin in the Woods, it's a good, decent movie. You'll, have fun watching that, but you want the good stuff, you go with Evil Dead. Yep. So that is my pick for the movie showdown. The winner, Evil Dead, baby. Groovy.
Alright, so my scores for the films, I agree with Robbie that The Evil Dead deserves a 7.75. Again, it's a very good movie, but like I said before, just the gore itself alone does not drive the whole film. It is a very highly rated film for me. I know that other critics and stuff kind of bash on it a little bit, but, For Cabin in the Woods, I gave it a much higher score than anyone else. I don't see how the hell that it got a 6 or a 6.5. Now, movies like Saw or Dead Silence or something stupid like that, I can see them getting like a 6.5, but I gave Cabin in the Woods an 8.25. It's original. It's a lot better than a lot of new horror movies out there nowadays. It's kind of hard to come up with new material for horror. It's like, all right, so are we going to do a slasher film? Are we going to do an alien film? Are we going to do this kind of film or this one? This movie just throws it all together. Also, you don't have a whole concept of, people at work controlling all this to please something, I just, like I said, I've just never seen that before. But I guess at the end of the day, Evil Dead wins. Evil Dead is the winner. So, this month, we're doing something a little bit new with our showdown to kind of go along with the horror theme of everything. We're also going to do our movie pitches there at the end, but we came up with the idea of doing which film would be harder to survive from. We're going to do this the next couple weeks with the rest of the horror films, and we're just going to go back to just doing our regular movie pitches. But I'm going to go ahead and go first. Between the two movies, I feel that The Cabin in the Woods would be the harder film to survive from, just for the fact that, yes, you have all these guys controlling everything. They control all the monsters and everything. I look at both films that you got Cabin in the Woods, that's an umbrella, and then Evil Dead's underneath that, just for the fact that when you look at the whiteboard in Cabin in the Woods, you got Angry Molesting Tree written on there. You have Deadites written on there. So this is telling me that, say, if those people went down to the cellar and picked up the book from Evil Dead, that the Deadite would come up and the Angry Molesting Tree would come up, and that would be the reason why they die. because of that, at the end of the day, Cabin in the Woods is going to be the one that's harder to survive from, just for the fact that in Evil Dead, that could be because of those people in that control room controlling everything. That's why. Also, with Cabin in the Woods, you're pretty much screwed because you're locked in a grid. It's kind of like the Hunger Games. You know, you're in this dome, and you can't go anywhere because there's an invisible force field. I would like to see that Hunger Games. Cabin in the Woods and Hunger Games mix up. You take 30 teenagers and set a bunch of monsters on them. That'd be pretty funny. So, Brian, let's let you go ahead and go first. Let's see what movie you think would be able to survive from, or what would be the hardest to survive from.
Okay, so the question is, which movie would you survive the longest in between Evil Dead and The Cabin in the Woods? For me, I would have to pick Cabin in the Woods, just because Cabin in the Woods, there's someone that's just seconds away to hitting any switch to make one of the many, many, many monsters down below come up and kill you at any given time. It could be right when you get inside that area of the woods. They can send the clown up to come up and kill you. Which in Evil Dead, it doesn't happen until they go down in the cellar or in the bedroom or somewhere in the cabin to find that Book of the Dead and to read off those, I think those Latin words, to summon the evil spirit from the woods that comes up into the cabin to turn them all evil and all that. So it might take a little longer for that to happen if you're inside the Evil Dead movie. You might make it some hours more before you find that book. Otherwise, in Cabin in the Woods, you're trapped. You can't get out. They shut you down inside that big, giant wooded area with the cabin. So once you get inside there, you could be killed within just a couple minutes if they have one of the monsters come up out of the ground to come after you. So I think you would last just a little bit longer probably in the Evil Dead than you would in Cabin in the Woods. So yeah, for me, I will pick Cabin in the Woods to die quicker. I would survive longer in Evil Dead. So
I feel like with both of these films, the chance of survival rate is probably pretty slim to none. But I guess if I had to choose which film film setting I'd have a better chance of survival in, probably the Evil Dead remake. Even though being surrounded by deadites in the woods is pretty scary too, and I'd probably be dead in that case too. But I would say between the two, I'd have to take my chances with the Evil Dead story, just because with the Cabin in the Woods, it's like you're trapped in a certain area in the woods that they've kind of got like outlined and trapped in. If you remember in the film, they try to escape the area, and Chris Hemsworth's character jumps over like a cliff on his motorcycle, trying to get on the other side, and he ends up like running into an invisible force field that pretty much like explodes his bike, and he ends up dying there. But so I feel like you're trapped there, so you really can't escape the area, which in the original Evil Dead you couldn't escape that area either, because when Bruce Campbell and them tried to go back over the bridge was always either missing, where it like collapsed, or I believe I think the second sequel it was flooded. But with the Cabin in the Woods, they basically got you trapped there, and underneath the ground they've got a couple dozen different monsters and killers, and things like giant snakes that's just waiting down there, and who knows what's being released up to kill you. So I feel like your odds are, in that story, are probably slim to none. And I would say between the two, I would take my chances with the Evil Dead story plot. Alright, so that's Box Office Robbie. I'm out.
Okay, so it sounds like all around the table that Cabin Woods would be the hardest movie to survive from. Yeah, like Robbie said, you got a forest full of deadites, but, like I said, the deadites could be released by the controllers in the Cabin in the Woods movie, so, yeah. So, let's move on to our movie trailers or movie pitches. Robbie usually does a trailer, so me and Brian do pitches. So trailer and pitches. So we'll leave Robbie as last for usual because usually he has the better one. Save best for last. So Brian, why don't you go ahead and do yours?
Okay, so my movie pitch this week is the movie is called The Evil Cabin. So the storyline I have is Roseanne and her husband, Denzel Washington, go to a cabin for vacation. And I'm thinking some deep cabin out in maybe, I don't know, Colorado or something. So eventually Roseanne finds papers and old books down in the cellar. These books and these sheets of paper contain drawings and descriptions of ways to attempt suicide, and some pictures actually show them doing suicide. So this really terrifies her and Denzel Washington, her husband, in it. And at first they want to leave, but things go wrong. Car has all flat tires. They get signal, so they can't use their cell phones. So it's starting to get dark, so they decide to go back in the cabin and try to wait till morning, till daylight gets there, and then go hike and hopefully find someone that can help them. So as the night goes on, lots of stuff happens. Lots of evil spirits come after them, scare them real bad. So eventually Denzel Washington in it gets possessed by evil spirits and comes after Roseanne to try to kill themselves. So eventually Roseanne finds out that lots of people have gone to this cabin to do suicide, that this cabin is notorious for people to come there to kill themselves. So I have the tagline as the cabin for the dead. So I thought this would be an interesting storyline here. It's real funny how we came up with Roseanne doing a horror cabin movie. So I thought it'd be funny as Denzel Washington is her husband in it. So I thought I came up with a pretty interesting storyline. I thought that would be pretty cool if they go to a cabin and find out that this cabin is, out in the woods for people to come there by themselves or whatever, to come there to do suicide. So, which lots of evil spirits with that. A lot of people who did suicide. I would think that cabin would be pretty haunted. So that is my movie pitch of the week.
Okay, so this week I actually wrote some stuff down instead of just coming up with it off the top of my head. I feel like this movie's going to be a little bit better. So this movie is going to star Rosanne Barr, because that's who we're doing this week. This movie is going to be, well, I'm going to save the title for this towards the end. So this movie is about a group of college kids who spend the weekend in a cabin where a family was murdered in the 1990s. Now there's going to be 3 males, 3 females. They're going to be all couples, boyfriend, girlfriends. So there is a college tradition to see how long you can last in this cabin before someone gets scared, because going to a cabin is very spooky. especially when someone's been murdered there. A whole family has been murdered there. So, during the evening, one of the girls picks up an old, dusty TV guide. Her boyfriend yells at her and telling her, "You must not read from the book! It isn't current." So, later on, after exploring the cabin later that night, they find an old family album of the murdered family. As they're doing this, the girl who picked up the TV guide starts hearing a ringing in her ears that won't stop. And this is what she hears. So after a while, her boyfriend asks her, "What's wrong with you? What do you hear? What is it? What's that ringing in your sound?" And she's like, "I don't know. It sounds a lot like shitty 90s sitcom music. It's the strangest thing. It just won't stop. It just keeps playing. The dun 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 dun. This is just disturbing. Oh my god." So overnight, they go to sleep, and she wakes up, and she's gained a lot of weight. She's gone shorter. She also has aged 40 years, and her voice becomes very annoying. So with this, they think something's wrong with her. So they don't find out quite yet that her body has been fully possessed by the late Rosanne Connor. So because her friends are freaking out, they decide to go ahead and quarantine her. They stick her in one of the bedrooms and lock the door because they don't also want to get sick. And all they hear coming from the door of the quarantined room is... So at this point, they are freaking out quite a bit because that is the most annoying laughter that is on the face of the earth, and they just can't stand it anymore. When suddenly her boyfriend, who also touched that TV guide, starts hearing in his ears. At this point, he is starting to freak out because he's also starting to hear shitty 90s sitcom music. He doesn't know what to do. Then suddenly hears a loud pitched word yelled from inside the room. The laughter has stopped. This word is Dan. I can't believe this, the guy will say. I hope I'm not going to turn into the husband. So at that time, when he says that, the camera zooms in on the boyfriend, who has now been turned into Dan Connor. One by one, they all start turning into the rest of the murdered family. DJ, Darlene, and Jackie. All comes down to the last girl who finally kills herself, stating in her last words, "I will not become Becky. Never Becky. I hear that she was the most annoying of all." So as she takes her life, the possession stops. Everyone goes back to normal. The ghosts need to possess a total of 6 bodies to complete their transformation. That way they can come back to the living world. But sadly, because of the sacrifice that the last girl makes, she is unable to be brought back. So she is officially dead. This movie will be called Connor's Cabin. So I wanted to let Robbie here go ahead and do his movie trailer. So Robbie, go ahead and do yours.
Okay, this is Box Office Robbie, and this is my movie pitch trailer for the week. Enjoy. The following story is based on true events. Sort of. What starts out as just a joyride on Halloween night turns out to be a night they won't live to regret. Look, the car won't start. What do you want me to do? I don't know, idiot. You're the one who drove off into a ditch. A lonely cabin was their only retreat from the rain. No signal, no phone, no help. Someone's outside! They're not outside! It's coming from the basement! Wrong road. Wrong cabin. Wrong woods. From the producers of The Strangers comes this new horror thriller. LA Times calls it the most terrifying film of the year. Rosanne Barr, Dan Aykroyd, and 2 other people who 98% most likely will die. Deep in the woods. To them, it was just a harmless cabin. To him, it was his home. In theaters, October 24th.
All right, that was the prequel in there, Robbie. So, last but not least, we got Brian with his movie quote of the week. And before we get into that, I just want to go ahead and say follow us on Facebook, like us on Twitter, or follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. The link is in the description if this is on YouTube, because we don't want to cause any spam or cause people to leave their website. We are at BZ Cinema Addicts on Twitter, and go to facebook.com/BZ Cinema Addicts. You can like us there, follow us, comment, review, whatever. So I'm going to turn this over to Brian here, and he's going to give you his movie quote of the week.
Okay, so the movie quote of the week, which is also the clue for next week's showdown, and I will post the Throwback Thursday movie of this movie quote. So if you know what it is, you go ahead and comment. Let us know what movie you think it is. This movie here is a very good classic movie. If you haven't seen this horror movie, definitely needed to check it out once we reveal it to you, or if you already know it, and then that's great. So here is the movie quote. Claudia, you've been a very, very naughty little girl. Okay, so that is the movie quotes. So if you know it, go ahead and post it on our iTunes or Facebook or Twitter.
Okay, everyone. We are the Cinema Addicts, and we'll see you guys next week. Goodbye, folks.